this meetup. Our goal is basically to connect. Primarily, we were thinking with folks that have gotten a hotspot, although I see we've got a lot of folks that haven't gotten a hotspot. So, it will be more general. I'd love to hear what folks in the room's experiences and what brought them interested in this Internet of Things hotspot system through Helium. So maybe we just go through and one by one introduce ourselves and what brought us here. So Atta, A-T-T-A, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, you can just call me K.
Sure.
Okay. So I'm a software engineer and head of education at Holberton in New Haven, which is at District. And so David introduced this to me and actually brought us a hotspot that we're going to set up tomorrow. And so that's why I'm here to learn more about it. If it's going to be helpful for setting up tomorrow.
Great.
And you see someone I know here. This is really cool, Michael.
Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, doing good. I'll turn on my camera here in a sec, but yeah, keep going.
Great. Well then, Michael, why don't you go next since you're.
All right. Well, I'm Mike Kuszpa. I found out about this from John from a Westville Dads group. I'm a science teacher here in New Haven, so I first started hearing about cryptocurrency from Southern Connecticut State University. So that's where I kind of got into this. But yeah, so I've got a hotspot over here, and it's just I've heard a lot of IoT lately, a lot of buzzwords, so I decided to jump on in.
Great. And we'll jump down. Brenda.
Oh, okay. Well, we have a hotspot, and we're in the northeast corner of New Haven, and we've been trying to figure out what's going on. It's been giving us little messages that we don't quite know what they're all about, and so we're trying to learn a little bit more what's happening with our hotspot.
Okay, Gina.
Hey, my name is Gina Bingham. I work at the New Haven Free Public Library, and we're kind of looking into possibly hosting one of these. I'm considering hosting one personally too. I think this is a really interesting idea. So I'm really curious to see how people that have started out are finding it and just learn a little bit more about the whole deal. So thanks.
Yeah, I'll jump to Rich and we'll end with John. Rich?
Okay, well, Brenda said it pretty well. We're trying to find out more about it. We're hooked up, and we need an education of how to understand these reports we're getting from it. So, back to JR.
Great, and John, if you wanted to jump into talking a little bit about things, that'd be fine too, or I can do it if you'd prefer.
Sure, I'm going to let this siren go by. Hang on. Okay, yeah, hi, I'm John Fitzpatrick. I am interested in the Internet of Things. I've been immersing myself for like a couple of years now, and I've founded, I think you can say I've founded 1.5 Internet of Things startups, and I managed an Internet of Things system at Yale New Haven Health. The second startup I was trying to get off the ground out of MakeHaven and did some prototyping there and was talking to JR about it at the time. And first heard about Helium, in the first half of last year, maybe April or May. And it was intriguing because there's a lot of run-of-the-mill Internet of Things stuff, connect this and monitor that. But the connectivity is a big issue, and nobody's solved it yet. And this sounded like a really interesting approach. And they were at the time. Well, Helium has been a startup for 8 years now. They actually launched a hardware platform before that failed, but they retained the the trust of their investors. They raised more money, and they came up with this blockchain decentralized idea, which was really intriguing at the time. And they launched it in like August of last year in Austin. They made a key decision last summer and took it a little further this spring to become compatible with LoRa, which is a radio protocol for the Internet of Things that allows low power, so it doesn't use your doesn't use up a device's battery, long distance communications, but at a very low data rate. So they became compatible with LoRa, which made them compatible with many devices already on the market. And it was a great idea. You know, they dropped doing their own radio protocol, and now the hotspots became generally available. They've taken off. You know, there's a question of whether anybody would buy into this idea, whether anybody would spend hundreds of dollars on these devices, and that answer has been answered with an emphatic yes. There was, I think there's 7,300 on the network as of today, and so I was talking to JR. We were talking about this. We wanted to get some Internet of Things connectivity set up in New Haven. We talked to the city about it. We had batted around some ideas, and with Helium, it allowed us to just kind of do it in a grassroots way. And we set a goal of ordering 15, because that kind of gets you up to a level in Helium's eyes. You become a patron, and they offer you a discount and stuff like that. And you know, JR and I pulled it off. And we got the 15. We found homes for all 15. They are in the owner's hands. I think 12 of them have been deployed. Kay says he's going to get his up tomorrow. That'll make 13. And it has been really exciting to watch it come online. As you probably know, they interact with each other to validate the network, and it's been fun to watch that happen. And as they validate the network, they earn cryptocurrency, and that it's exciting to see your cryptocurrency balance go up. You know, I could dive into the tools.
Yeah, why not? I think it'd be great to just start showing, and we can start describing some of the graphics and what they mean.
Okay, great. So,
and if you want to start with the desktop version, just overall, and then maybe we open up my phone app and we'll go through that, and then we can get into some of the other tools. Okay,
so I do not have anything prepared. I will go through starting with probably some of the most basic stuff that is on the Helium website. There are other websites which aggregate and analyze information. I can show you that. And please let's let this discussion go wherever it wants to go. I think that people will be most interested in, you know, how does my hotspot earn Helium tokens, HNT, and how do I maximize that? So I'll talk about that shortly into this.
Yeah, so I sent you the coverage link. Do you want me to pop it up, or?
I can share my screen, or you can share it.
Great. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So present now, and I'm going to share my entire screen. I think that'll be fine. Share. What am I doing? Why is share grayed out? Share your entire screen.
So John, why don't I just share it, and then you can take over. You got it? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, and actually this is easier because this is my my Helium Chrome window, and I've got all these tabs which is all Helium related information.
Right.
Okay, this is network.helium.com, and this I'm going to refresh this, and this shows where hotspots are, and they are almost exclusively in the United States right now. You'll see a few in Canada. There we are, 7,257. And things seem to run a little more slowly on my machine when I'm on a video call. So we'll see the entire United States here, and it is lit up, except for kind of some of the big empty spaces in the middle. There is a big band from Boston to Washington, you'll see, and a handful in Canada and a handful in Mexico. They haven't really started selling into those places yet. Just a few up there, but they are selling to Canada soon. And then we can slide over to Europe, and they have a few here and there. I think they've been seeding it. The next batch that they're manufacturing are targeted for Europe. So here we can zoom in on New Haven. Stop quickly to take a look at Connecticut. So we're representing pretty well here with this cluster. There's a bunch in Hartford, and New London, the Groton area is doing okay, and Stonington has a bunch too. As we come in here, there's a few in the surrounding areas, but in the past 2 weeks, we've lit up, New Haven proper pretty well. So there you have it. Now the key, as I'll get into, for earning cryptocurrency through the network validation process is to be within radio range of other hotspots. And thus the ones that are doing really well right now are this group of 3 out in Westville, because they can talk to each other. This one right here was the only one on the map before we got going. That's somebody who is independent of our group, independent of MakeHaven. I'd love to know who it is. I don't know yet. And then we have 2 here in Westville, and then there's 2 over here, one in Fairhaven and one across the river, that can talk to each other a lot, and that's been good for them. This is me right here, and you'll see when I get into how hotspots are scored that I wound up being in the worst of all possible worlds, because I connect very occasionally with these, and I think this one, but most of the time I fail, and if you fail, your score goes down. And if you have a high score, it makes you more likely to get into a special category that really ups your earnings. Okay, so that's the coverage. Here are the challenges on this tab. Okay. Now, the system uses challenges to validate the network coverage. So it helps prevent people gaming the system by just setting up a hotspot, but then unplugging it or not connecting to the network. And the way the challenges work is that the system picks out a group of hotspots that are nearby each other. And then another hotspot, the challenger, which can be anywhere, it doesn't have to be near those, issues a challenge over the internet. And it's technically a little in depth, but to try to summarize it quickly, the hotspots are placed in a sequence in the challenge group, and there is a nested encrypted packet. And the first hotspot in this sequence is the only one that can decrypt that outer layer. So when it receives this packet over the internet from the challenger, it does the decryption and then sends it out over the internet back to say that, okay, I received this, I decrypted it, I'm here, I'm awake, I'm working. Now, that first hotspot then broadcasts the remaining layers out through its radio. And if the second one nearby receives it, it decrypts its layer. It's the only one that can do that, sends the proof of its decryption through the internet, gets credit for it, and then broadcasts what remains of that package to the third. And there are 2 to 7 involved in these layers. in these challenges, and they and if you send out a challenge, or if you successfully participate in one of these, you get rewarded with cryptocurrency earnings, with HNT, which can be exchanged for dollars on some exchanges worldwide. Now, this did not open up any challenges, and I don't know why. Let me try reloading that. Did that make any sense? Does anybody have a question about that challenge process?
So it's pretty much just like a proof of stake, let's say, or a proof of work, like Bitcoin and those miners, essentially solving problems, but just communicating with each other.
It is. It's you know, that's a computational load, a computational challenge that Bitcoin has to do. This is you know, proof of coverage rather than proof of work. Hey JR, you
yeah, I'm gonna share my phone just so that
share it
people
through your
can see.
app. Yeah, bring up a challenge
Yeah.
through the app.
Yeah, give me one moment here.
So we can put an app on our computer, do the same thing as that we can do with our phone, right?
It's not exactly the same. So the phone app is the only way to get your personalized information. So I'm going to go back. This is like the dashboard. And what I did is I clicked network on the bottom. And then I'm clicking the challenges where it has like the 8 million with the question mark. So then we go into challenges, and it's showing all of the challenges that are happening anywhere. But I clicked the little picture of a man in the top corner, or a person, a figure, not necessarily a man. Now this will limit to just the challenges that I'm involved with. And what you're seeing is that top one was a challenge from Mean Licorice Dash Hound. That it was, there's an eyeball with one. So John, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but there's an eyeball there.
You know what would help JR is, why don't you click on that? Click on that challenge so we can see the details.
And 3 were involved. So I'm going to click on it now, and it will give us a diagram of what happened.
Yeah. Yep. So in purple, that is the challenger, which can be anywhere on the network. It doesn't have to be nearby. And then JR is shown in blue. Is that you, JR, the mammoth?
Yeah, I am a colossal oily mammoth. That's what I am.
Yep.
Who initiated the challenge? Was that the person who owns that hotspot?
No, it's a random person on the internet. So Mean Licorice Dash Hound.
Okay.
And it's not somebody. It's automatically done by the system. It's not something the person who owns that hotspot did. The hotspots are programmed to automatically try to generate these as frequently as possible, and the system limits them to like one every half hour. And you get some crypto earnings for doing that. Not a lot, but you get some. Right. So the purple one sent that to JR, and this is JR right here. And he was the one, and then he broadcast it, and so Colossal Oily Mammoth broadcast it through radio, and it was received first by Tangy Ceramic Koala successfully. And then that was decrypted, that outer layer was taken off, and then broadcast again to Melted Pastel Gorilla, who successfully received it, sent in the proof of the decryption, and everybody got credit for that. And then if you're a witness, if you successfully receive a challenge packet, but it's not meant for you, all right? Whether or not you're part of that challenge. So stage 1, there was 1 witness. Stage 2, there was 2. Stage 3, there was 3. So that's how that worked out.
No, John, I think actually it's stage 1 witnesses, 2 witnesses, and stage 3 witnesses, and I only have 1 witness.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I'm sorry.
The 1 witness is Tangy Ceramic Koala. So basically, because they weren't involved in the last one, I guess that's how I'm reading it.
Yeah. Okay. So Tangy Ceramic Koala witnessed the 3rd one. Yeah.
And so nobody who owns one of those hotspots had to do anything. It was all done by the hotspot. You could just go see if you were involved or not. Is that right?
Yeah,
That is
exactly.
correct.
So
Yeah.
you go back here. These are all the ones I've been involved with. And so this is like at 5 p.m. It's doing it constantly. 4 p.m., 3
Yeah.
p.m. And so some of them are, they're all initiated from different spots all over the world. And you're getting different results. And one of the things we're trying to figure out is why are we getting different results? So I'm just going to do this one at 2 p.m. with quick basal locus, where it looks like I got somebody on the call. So the Eagle Misty Spider, I didn't receive it. The Colossal Oily Man, you tried to send it to me. I was supposed to be involved, and then it was a failed connection.
Boo.
And then the other ones didn't get anything.
Okay. But Eager Misty Spider gets credit for doing its job, right?
Yeah, but not as much credit as it would get if it was cascading the. So you need a higher up antenna over there.
What time did that happen? Oh, 7:25. Oh no, what?
2:41 p.m.
Okay.
So can I ask a possibly silly question?
Sure.
In the sense then it's in the best interest for the entire group of people to make sure that we all have successful working hotspots, because if the networks closest to us work well, we all gain from that, correct?
Yeah, so up to a point. So right now the network is rewarding essentially that there are a series of hubs that can prove that they are within a distance of each other. And as devices get deployed, then there'll be additional awards for the for connecting with these devices. And so, first build the network and then connect to the devices. And then we'll see even more density. But essentially, you're right. We want a measure of our success right now is both coverage and interconnection.
Yeah. And Gina, you've kind of touched upon the genius of this system, which is that if you own a hotspot, it's in your interest to get a whole bunch of people around you to buy them too, right? And provide better coverage for the network, because the more you have around you, the more you have in radio range, the better you'll perform on these challenges and the more crypto you learn.
And so you can see just on my activity, there's different, 1 hour ago, my hotspot mined 1 HNT, right? And that's translating right now, to like $1.50?
Yes.
Yeah. And then right before that, 2 hours ago, it got another $1 and then like a fraction. And so this is all based on the value to the network of the interactions.
One thing I just want to make note. I was looking at that. Everything was pretty much in my hotspot. Radiant Misty Tarantula. It was pretty much steady until I ended up getting a consensus reward of 13 HNT at 1 p.m. today.
Yeah. So I can. You want me to drop into that now?
That would be awesome, because if I can keep that going on, that's a nice thing.
Yeah. So, can I grab this back, JR?
Yeah, take it back.
Okay.
All right, quick question. What's a HNT?
HNT is the short 3 initial code for the cryptocurrency that's being earned when your device is doing various actions. So that's the thing that you can go and trade for real money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is when we get into blockchain stuff, which is tough to explain, number one, because it's complicated, and number two, because I don't completely understand it. A blockchain is a distributed way of storing information. Oh, what just happened? And you need trusted parties to write new information to the blockchain, to create a new block and add it to the chain. And I don't know. Hey, JR, can you check if you can go to that consensus tab?
Yep, I'm going now.
Because I don't know why it's failing for me.
Also failing for me.
Okay.
So they must have, you know, they have an error.
So you know, I'm gonna let. I think the only value there is to let you know that there is a tab. There's not too much to see, but I can explain what the consensus group is. So the consensus group writes blocks to the blockchain, and it validates transactions. And the information on the blockchain includes information about data that the system is receiving and passing along to its destination. It also includes data about as hotspots are added, and as rewards are generated through data transfer and through proof of coverage. And as Mike pointed out, if you get into the consent, you get Helium token rewards for getting into the consensus group. Now, how do you get into the consensus group? Okay, JR's got a good example there. So is this the current consensus group?
I think so. It says active at the top and has a little spinner, and it says 646. So.
Very cool. So that one at the top there, Early Hemp Corgi, is the one I was going to use an example. Early Hemp Corgi is at the Hartford Makerspace, Makerspace CT. And I am going to, let me bring up something. So I'm going to go to sitebot.com/helium, which allows you to dig into some analyzed Helium data, and it aggregates stuff and shows you a whole bunch of cool stuff. So let me grab the screen here.
Yep.
Okay. This site does seem to be working. Click share there. Okay. As you can see, sitebot.com/helium, click on hotspots. There's a lot of cool data in here to dig into. And I'm going to type in early, and you need dashes, hemp corgi, search. Now, early hemp corgi has been set up for quite a while. And you can see here.
So John, so this is a tool developed by Helium or developed by external people to basically.
I think this is external. Yeah.
Okay, and these are just people pulling data and trying to be part of the network. Gotcha.
Yeah, produce something useful, help the effort. So 2,684 tokens. You can see. Now here is the history of the earnings. They were going along pretty slowly, and then they moved it to a different location. I think they might have moved it out of the basement into the first floor window. They're in downtown Hartford, and that's when their earnings picked up. But these spikes here are when they get into when the hotspot gets selected for the consensus group. 241 day, right there. I think there was a data problem here, and that's when they went down to 0. And here is, that's today. You see, 142 in one day times $1.50 each. So you're looking at $210 right there. Now, how is the consensus group selected? How are you going to get into this? Well, it depends. It's reliant on your score here. And when you respond successfully to challenges, your score goes up. When you fail at challenges, your score goes down. You start out at 0.25 and you move up or down from there. And it doesn't let you stay somewhere. It's always, there's kind of a gravity constantly pulling you either up or down towards 0.25. But you get up into these 0.9, 0.99 areas, and that's when you have a decent shot at the consensus group, because the consensus group consists of 16 hotspots, and it is formed by the system ranks them according to consensus score, starts at the first one, and the one at the very top has a 1% chance of getting at the group, right? And it either gets in it or doesn't. And then the second one also has a 1% chance of getting in the group. And it keeps on going down the list giving each one a 1% chance until it's filled up the consensus group with 16. Now let's take a look at, this is another useful tool called mylar.app. And you can make a list of hotspots that you want to follow. And here is early hemp corgi up at 0.99, right? I've ordered these according to score. Now, Mike, do you mind if I say the name of yours? I think you already did, so.
Yeah, that's good. That's fine.
So here's Mike, Radiant Misty Tarantula. Mike, with a score of 0.89, got into its consensus group. So that's kind of like hitting the jackpot. And
I'm right above.
Yeah. So keep an eye on that. You're probably due. It depends on the gods of random chance. And you can see that everybody in our group is doing pretty well. Here's some people here, 0.25, 0.25, who are, that may mean you're not in range of anybody, right? This right here is an indication of your connectivity. Now, as I said, I'm in the worst possible world. Here I am down at the bottom with a score of 0.0095. So I'm not going to get into any consensus groups, but I'm working on fixing that. Okay, so let me stop sharing here and ask if any of that made any sense. Do you have any questions on how the scores work, on how the consensus group works? Yeah.
Well, I think from my point of view, or my hotspot's point of view, it would be advantageous for me to have an antenna that is aimed down at all the New Haven people, because they are the closest ones to me, and to position my hotspot that's favorable to that azimuth, to that location. And that's something I have not done. And I can see now that if I do that, I probably will get better response or better coverage in the system.
Yeah, Rich, you know tons about radio and wireless communication, so I'm sure you know all about antennas. And I'm not sure you should get one that is directional, because who knows what's going to get built out in other directions around you. I do know that you're pretty close to a kind of a large obstacle. If you get an antenna above that, you'd be in good shape.
What obstacle is that?
Aren't you close to the highway? Rich, isn't the highway going to block you from getting anything to and from points west of you?
It would be southwest of me.
Yeah.
So the highway is west of me, and then everybody else is southwest of me.
Okay.
So no, I could take the antenna off and put on a high gain antenna that's really looking down at New Haven, just to see how that affects us and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you want to increase the range of your hotspot, an antenna is the way to go. And I've been researching this so that I can get out of the huge hole I've dug myself. And there are limits to how strong of a signal you can broadcast, and these are put in place by the FCC. And the limit on this for the frequencies that we're operating on is 36 decibel milliwatts. So the Helium device itself puts out 27. The stock antenna is 1.5, so that's well below the limit. I have been researching this, and I am intending to get this antenna here, which is 11. So
we don't
27
right now, John.
Oh, okay. All right, let me where am I? I stopped. I have to go to a different window, I think. Are you seeing the window now?
No. Is that like the $50 antenna that I was looking at?
This one is $90. Okay, present now. Present entire screen. Okay, so here is an 11 dB antenna. So 27 plus 11 makes 38. That
We're
is
still not
above
seeing
the.
it. Do you want to share the link?
Yeah, hang on. I must have missed a click here somewhere. Yep. Thank you, JR. Okay, how's that?
Not yet. Oh, it's coming. It's coming.
There we go.
Yeah, you're in there with
Okay.
three different presences in the meeting right now.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so this is the antenna company, Altalix. They make this 11 dB antenna. It's 8.5 feet long. The device is 27. This is 11. That makes 38. That's above the limit of 36. But I will need a cable, and some signal is lost over the cable. And if I have a 45-foot long cable, which is about what I need to get it from the roof down into my house, that'll take me down to 36. But my performance will improve because, number one, I have a better antenna, but also because it'll be up on a roof instead of in the window. $90 antenna. It also costs $120 to ship. The cable I'm looking at is going to be about $60, and I'm talking to installers right now. Let's see. Here's what is this? Oh, that's some more data on it. That. Yeah, that's some cable info. USAcoax.com is where you can get a cable that is the length you want and has the connectors you need. But you know, just the power gain from the antenna alone will, I think, increase my range 5 times, and then putting it up on the roof instead of in the window will give me some further gain. And I'm hoping that will, at the very least, get me in range of those Westville hotspots, and maybe in range of the whole city. You know.
Well, height is always good. Height is good.
Yeah.
The higher up you get it, the better.
Yeah.
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 And so, John, maybe it's worth mentioning. So that one thing we're thinking about for the next stage is obviously we're working on the network, and that allows us to deploy devices. So I've ordered just a couple of development boards, which are the receivers for this, as well as they have like a little tracking chip. And we should be able to use those to move about the city and get a real sense of, like, on the street, how often do those devices connect and are able to send data to this network. And that will tell us some things. Like right now, we see that there's a really big advantage of having things high up on the buildings for the hotspots to talk to each other. But as you go down to the street level and you're trying to get the radio signal down there, we might find that you need a higher density, you need different placements, and the optimization becomes a little bit different. So we're learning. That's the next track. And what I want to do as MakeHaven is start deploying, do a hackathon, do activities where we make devices or prototype devices that have practical application. And one that was mentioned was the Connecticut Trail Census was looking for ways to communicate data on trail counters back to their central system. They're currently using SD cards they physically go and get, and the cellular connections were quite expensive. So this would be a low cost, low energy consumption alternative. So that's a great thing for us as makers to play with and prototype. And there's a lot of other ideas floating out there for what the network actually does as far as supporting devices. And John, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
If you have a device that is sending out a signal, and you come by my hotspot, then my hotspot, let's say it was well connected, which it doesn't seem to be at this point. Who pays for that connection? Can you test it without can you send signals into the system without having to pay to get the signal in?
Yeah. So no, I mean the credits are very inexpensive. They're like 100th or 1,000th or 1/10 of a thousandth of a cent or something like that, which translates to like a byte of data, which should be sufficient for sending in just a ping of what the temperature was at a sensor. And this is, these things are not sending images. These are sending just a small string of text. So you would have to have an account, and it would debit that account. So you could put $1 in it and do a lot of testing with that $1. Their option, the thing called the tab, which is their locator, that is, I think you pay $50, and then you can use that forever. And they just kind of prepaid the account so that there's no charge. So I got one of those to play with. But no, so you have to pay, because then they use that payment, they slice it up, and that's part of what goes into the award system for the future, for the network. So that pays the network owners, the hub owners, as that gets busier.
So can we use that device to kind of figure out how wide of an area our hotspot is good for?
That's exactly what John and I were talking about using that for. So we could drive around, or we could find some way to transport those around the city and look at all the data and the charts and see where things are popping up. Though we haven't even looked at devices and what data comes up. So I don't actually know how to do that analysis at this point, which is why we're going to set up, why I ordered the test ones, the development kits, and we'll try and get that going.
Okay, my first goal is going to establish communications down into the New Haven cluster. That's the first thing I'm going to try to do, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and Gina's mentioning the hotspots are sold out. Yeah, so they kind of went like hotcakes. So, and a lot of the stuff happening right now is speculative, right? So you're seeing a lot of the value increase in this cryptocurrency. You got to remember that this ultimately is related to devices and who's paying for a device to communicate to a system. So there's some upward limit to, like, I would think, maybe it's pure speculation will drive the value up, but it should in some way be anchored or connected to the value of the communication of those devices, which right now is based on speculation. But as we see devices come out and how it's communicating and how those fees rack up, then we'll understand better what that value is.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit more, because it's another kind of dimension to the complexity of how Helium works. So, as JR said, the people who have the devices moving around that are reporting location or temperature or water level or whatever, they do have to pay to use the network. It costs 1/1000th of a penny to send a 24-byte data packet. You can only pay for that with Helium tokens. And the money does not pass through Helium's hands. It is independent of Helium. What happens is the Helium tokens that are used to pay for data transfer are taken out of circulation, and they say that they are burned. And the system in giving out the rewards for data transfer and for proof of coverage network validation, those are created at the rate of roughly 5 million a month. And the system works in theory according to economic theory surrounding money supply, so that the tokens are created at a constant rate, but the rate at which they are burned depends on the network traffic. So let's say it's at equilibrium and about 5 million are being burned every month and 5 million are created, fine. Then, let's, for argument's sake, let's say that doubles and it goes up to $10 million a month. Sorry, 10 million tokens a month get burned. Well, now there are, you've got a net loss of 5 million tokens. You've decreased the supply of the tokens. Economic theory says supply goes down, price goes up. So the price of a Helium token will then go up. It will appreciate in value. And at that point, Helium tokens will buy more data going through the network. Because they're worth more, you don't need as many to buy that 24-byte data pack for one thousandth of a penny. So that's perhaps a quick way of saying that it's decentralized, so that the money isn't going from the network user to Helium to the hotspot owner. What's actually happening is this currency equilibrium that makes the value of the Helium tokens proportional to the amount of data flowing through the network.
Yeah, thank you, John, and thank you for correcting some of my errors around the amount of data and the value. Somebody mentioned about John, you mentioned about building your own. So I also I read through the documentation on building your own hotspot. And it's composed of essentially a Raspberry Pi, as Rich had previously shared. And actually, if you have that picture, maybe you want to share it so folks can see what's under the hood. A Raspberry Pi, and then a hat or a plugin that is the radio antenna portion. And then there's a couple of things that you can run on the Raspberry Pi or put in the Amazon cloud. So there's a little bit of like Linux development, but the instructions are pretty clear. So I think we will be, I ordered all the stuff to build a DIY hotspot because all the plans and software are out there. And if that's successful, it's less expensive, and it allows us to get more people on board. And I think it fits the maker ethos. I'm also interested in accessing the log files within the device itself. So as I was reading the documentation, it talks about it's using some open source software to do the LoRa communications handling. And it will have, even more robust than the pretty charts, it'll have just text logs of what's going on. And that might be useful for troubleshooting or diagnosing what's going on. So I think that's an interesting thing. Rich, did you have that picture? I can actually pull it up since you emailed it. Does anybody else have some thoughts?
You pull it up because I'm having trouble finding it.
Okay.
So while that's coming up, Rich, you built your hotspot that's part of this network?
No.
No? Okay, sorry.
No.
No, he just
Rich,
took it apart.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sharing now.
And then I can explain a little bit about what you're looking at for anybody. I know I can tell you a little bit of things that may not be obvious to you.
So you should be seeing it. Are you seeing it?
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, there you go.
So the green board is the Raspberry Pi. And if you back out some more so I can see the whole thing. You're too close to it. More. All right, and you see in the highest part, there's the antenna connection there. That little gold thing, that's where the antenna screws on, and you could angle it straight up or 90 degrees. And then this gray wire down there, that's a really high quality feed line. And the black thing here is a radio transmitter receiver. It transmits signals and receives signals, and it works at 916 megahertz. And the signal goes out down this wire and up here. And this wire has a specific length to it. It's related to the frequency, because if it's not related to the frequency, it won't work as well. So it's perfectly designed to work at that frequency. So here's where you would connect an external antenna. But on the other hand, you could take this whole thing out, and there's the connector right there. Oh, you can't see my pointer, but at the bottom of the black thing that says RAK, that's where you can connect another feed line and take it out to an antenna. The green board is the Raspberry Pi with all the it's a Raspberry Pi 3 with all the standard connections on it. And you can see on the far right, that one big silver connection, that's where you plug in your Ethernet cable to your home router. But all the USB connections right next to it, there's stacked. There's 4 of them. They're stacked, but you see 2 shiny silver connectors. They don't even get outside the plastic box, so you couldn't plug in a USB connector here. You'd have to take the whole thing out of the case. And then, but also it has on the far right a connector for a video screen, so you can hook a keyboard in here and a video screen. And it also has a place to power it up individually. You can see there's a fan down on the bottom of that black thing. That's a 5-volt fan, and it's just moving air through here. But then comes this black printed circuit board. And to be honest with you, I don't know. That's probably proprietary, and I don't know what it's doing at all. I just don't know. And I think that's a push button on the far left, and a coin battery to keep this battery's memory. Maybe this is where the 12 words are stored, and probably a clock chip, and this battery keeps it going. So power comes in here, and power comes in the upper left in that black connector. The antenna connects to the gold connector. The internet connects way off to the right in that big rectangular silver thing. But the interesting thing is that rectangular silver thing has a bunch of wires in it, and for TCP/IP communications back to your router. But there's extra wires in there. And one of the things that could be done is the power that goes into that black connector could easily come in through this cable, and then that power can be picked off and connected up to this black connector, in which case you could put this whole thing on a roof in an enclosure and with only one cable. That would be the Ethernet cable, and this would be called Power over Ethernet, PoE. And you don't have to have a power supply up there plugged in the wall. The power would come in here, and the internet communication would take place here. And all you need to do is have an antenna up here. So, and that, if you think about it, all of these parts can be removed and put in a different box. Now, my preference is to keep this cable as short as possible. And by the way, that LMR 600 that you showed me as a cable, that's 6/10 of an inch thick. Mm-hmm. That's what the 600 means. That's a stiff cable. It's really stiff. Mm-hmm. And long lengths of that, especially at this frequency, 916 megahertz, is going to be lost. It's better to move this whole thing up on the roof on a pole. That would be what I think we could maybe make that project at MakeHaven. All right, I'll turn it back over to JR.
Yeah, so I'm going to show you guys. So this is an example of us talking about the hat. So this is like the unit that would handle the radio stuff, and you'd add a Raspberry Pi to something like this. You can also buy a developer gateway, which is essentially the Raspberry Pi and everything in an enclosure. So this just gives you easier access to all those parts. It breaks up what's inside of the LoRa gateway as it is. And then you have to install all the software, because this is generic. This is not specific to Helium. This is something that could be used in lots of different networks, but has that LoRa protocol. So I ordered one of these, and I'm going to try doing all the software and seeing if I can get this running. And if that works, I can be more adventurous and start getting the individual components and using a Raspberry Pi 4 or whatever I want. And then when you think about the actual devices, so not the hotspots, but the devices, you start getting into these sorts of items. So these little low power antennas and boards. I'm going to accept cookies. So all of this is documented in Helium. So there's this page that's build a hotspot. Inside of it is the forwarding packet, the Helium miner, and the Helium network. And so the interesting part is the packet forwarder is basically the antenna and the Raspberry Pi. So that's picking up the signal and doing something with it. The Helium miner is all the stuff that we talked about, managing the mining of the currency. And so that can either run concurrently on the same Raspberry Pi, or you can send it to, say, like the Amazon cloud, and so cloud host it if you wanted, as far as I understand it in my first reading. And then the Helium network that you connect to, and they handle that. So it's just, the instructions are here. It's all, it's basic Linux commands and installing some software, doing some configuration, and seems doable. So that's what I've picked up from my wanderings through looking at Helium and building a hotspot and the devices.
One more quick comment back on the inside of the Helium box. There was that black thing that I said was the transmitter and the receiver and radio. They're available, and they cost about $95 each, just to let you know. So how the Raspberry Pi is communicating with it, I'm not sure. I don't know. I have to look up this. I just don't know that. I could probably get a little bit of an insight, but yeah, that black thing there that says RAK, that's the transmitter and the receiver. Here's the antenna. The antenna's on the bottom, and this black thing is a transmitter and a receiver. Let's see if it says LoRa contractor. I can't read it upside down. Anyway, that's the radio transmitter. That's about $95 from, I think, might have been Gigaparts. And I can see that it's plugging in here, and somehow that's connected up to this Raspberry Pi, probably over these GPIO pin connectors here. But I still don't know what this black board here does, that black printed circuit board. So anyway, back to JR.
All right, cool. Well, I'd love to hear what other people are thinking about, because this is, just people sharing what they're planning to do and what they're interested in, and maybe even ideas for what to deploy as far as devices.
I think we should take a hotspot apart and rebuild it into something that can go on top of a mast and hoist it up in with the existing antenna, by the way. No big expensive antenna. Compensate for that big antenna by just getting it up high and see how it works.
Mm-hmm. You're on mute, Chair.
John, if you send out what antenna, I'll probably get an antenna as well when you get one.
Mm-hmm. When
you figured out what all the things that work, because I'm doing pretty well as it is, and I can probably do a lot better if I get some more range.
Great. Yeah, we'll do. We can certainly put together a description of what the package is, and there are other antennas. There are smaller antennas, and there are indoor antennas too. The Helium community works, discusses Helium stuff on Discord, they were recently on Slack, but they switched to Discord. And there is an antenna channel there with lots of people who know lots of stuff. Hooking devices up to measure antenna performance. VSWR, I'm sure what that Rich means, Rich. It's something to do with antenna efficiency. But I think, what you mentioned before, JR, is that I've looked into the details on this, thought it through, and I'm going to do this. I can report what the effects are. And then if people are interested in improving their performance in that same way, they can go with what I did. They can leverage, the research that I did to do that. Hopefully I'll be able to recommend an installer if you don't want to install it yourself.
Yeah, and I know Ben Berkowitz, I was talking to him a bit about all of this, and he was thinking about locations that were high up and recruiting additional folks who could be good connectors across the city, so that some of these like underperforming or disconnected spots can start gaining some of that performance. And since the hotspots are sold out right now, the only way to do that is if using the raw chips, the ones that we can build ourselves, becomes viable or works out. So
some of the Helium hotspots on eBay have recently sold for $900. By the way, so
Wow.
if you go check eBay. There's one out there right now. Someone's got to use one. They're asking $200 for it. But when you look at the ones that have sold, they're like from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I saw one as high as $995 sold, not just asking, but actually completed.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
When you're thinking of locations, I mean, those natural choices would probably be where they do those weather stations as well. Like, how great would it be if the top of Eastrock was available?
Yeah.
So one thing I'm wondering if anybody has an answer for it is how are HNT awards, how will they really be effective if the network starts getting used? I know I ordered a Helium tab, and I'm just wondering if you get more devices on there using the network, if it's going to highlight New Haven as a place to receive more HNT.
Well, your share. So there is a certain percentage of the tokens that are minted that are allotted to data transfer. And, there's also a percentage allotted to proof of coverage. And there's also a percentage allotted to Helium and its investors. So that if we establish a robust network for IoT in New Haven and attract people and that attracts people who use the network, and that data that those devices are putting out flows through our hotspots, then we get a bigger share of the portion allotted to data transfer, right? Is that what you were asking, Mike?
Yes, because I know there's a lot of talk about, increasing the communication between our hotspots, but I'm wondering, if the other approach is just to increase the use of the network, create devices that are actually using it, whether it seems to be those tabs are for location. I don't know if it triangulates the hotspots to determine a location.
No, the tabs have GPS in them.
Oh, okay.
So they determine the location through GPS and then transmit that, the lat long coordinate via LoRa and to a Helium hotspot. Yeah. But that's right. I mean, what we can do is we can publicize this. It shows up on the map. Hopefully we'll get a bunch of hotspots up at the top of the into consensus groups, into the top of the listings, the rankings by the score. And that will entice people to, to begin deploying I can't think of the word, compatible devices in New Haven. And the city can help us out with this too through their marketing arm, right? Part of why I want to do this, and I'm sure JR and some others, that we want to enhance New Haven's reputation as the innovative center for Connecticut.
Yeah, because one thing that popped to my mind was I'm just thinking about different things that could talk to the network, and I'm thinking of buses, school buses. I'm thinking of parking meters that could possibly use this. I'm thinking of hospital devices.
Yeah.
That could be huge if they see that this infrastructure is out there.
Well, we know that the city is interested in one use case, which is monitoring the level of waters in the stormwater system, right? That's a very difficult challenge in a coastal city because the levels in the system go up and down with the tides. I've seen twice, and the second one was last year, where we had a big thunderstorm where the water was shooting out of a storm drain like a geyser, right? And that's not good because we have a mixed system, and there's water, there's water from the sewer system coming out into the street in that case. The city has devices that do that. They use cellular connections, and they pay $30 a month to collect them, to connect them through a cellular, a cellular contract. If you put a Helium device in that drops to like $1 or $2 a year, right?
Yeah, is that similar to the SCADA, the supervisory control and data acquisition networks used by like lift stations?
What kind of station?
Like lift stations for also for the sewer, because I remember when I worked on several military bases, it was called SCADA. So I know they had directional antennas that would go to, essentially turn on and off these pumping stations.
Yeah, so SCADA is a communication system protocol for industrial equipment. If you've got big factory machines that are outputting data that has to be monitored, that's what SCADA is used for. I've seen the device that the city is using right now. It goes under a manhole cover. There's a crossbar which presses onto the cylinder which goes down, and there's a big battery attached to it. It's like I think it's a $1,500, $2,000 device, and the city, the city's convinced that can be done more cheaply, which would enable them to monitor more locations and better manage the system.
All right, Kuszpa. So if I'm understanding, if anybody makes such a device, like let's say the city owns such a device, then they would buy a token that would cover the use of the device until it run out, and then they got to buy another token, and that the more people who are using the system, the more tokens that are being sold, then the price starts going up on the tokens. Is that right?
Yep.
Got it. Okay, just double check.
Yep. Yeah, in theory, for me, there's 4 big questions for Helium. The first one has been answered. Will people buy and deploy these hotspots? They've proven that people will. The second is, will companies actually make use of this network once it's in place? And I think that's the question for probably the next 12 months. And Helium is trying to help that along by selling these tabs, which only go to hotspot owners, and it allows hotspot owners to start sending some data through the system. The third question is, will this theory of Burnman equilibrium and that, the hypothesis that increased data transfer will drive up the price of the token, will that actually happen in practice? We have to see whether that happens. And the fourth is Helium's real moonshot, which is that if this network works for IoT, will it work for other things? For instance, if you took out that LoRa chip, that LoRa module, and replaced it with a 5G module, could you use a Helium type network, a decentralized network, to steal business from Verizon, AT&T, and Sprint, right? So that the profits that those people are making start coming to people like us for deploying that connectivity.
Yeah, that's right. We're stuck right now at 916 megahertz, but there's no reason why I couldn't go on to the 5 gigahertz band, where telephone and internet traffic is happening. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, that makes sense actually. Need a different antenna.
Yeah.
But heck, if it goes on a cell phone, it can go into a little box too.
So I didn't know if there's other folks that have had their hotspots set up that do you want to share their experience, or in particular data that they've looked at, and whether or not that's intuitive, and we can talk about what's in the interface. Oh, and it looks like David's popping in with chat about an antenna. Yeah. I don't know enough about, you've been doing the research on antennas. I know the antenna has to be suitable to this thing, and this looks like this is a 4G booster. So I would suspect that this would not be appropriate for that hotspot. That you need to get one that's going to work on that specific electromagnetic range that it's using. But John, maybe you want to.
There are many antennas already designed that'll work there. So just remember, the frequency is 916 megahertz, and there's an amateur band right next door to it. The same antenna would work just fine there. Big thing is, how big an antenna do you want? How do you connect it to this device? And right now, that little antenna is a monopole, most likely vertical. And what's in there is either a quarter wave antenna or a 5/8 antenna. I can't tell by looking at it. And then you can get gain by making other kinds of antennas. You can make antennas that get that are more sensitive and deliver a bigger signal to the radio, and also allow a better signal to radiate out to the world. But anyway, that's all experiment. My next goal is I'm gonna on a nice day, I'm gonna bring the hotspot up on the roof and just sit it up there outdoors, and hopefully it won't be raining or windy, and let's see how it does, as long as it's not too hot.
Yeah. Rich, I've got a question for you about antennas. The antenna that's currently on the hotspot, I've got to kind of point it out towards the window. Is there anything we should really do with that? Just point it straight up or point it out towards the window?
Good question. Good question. So that's called the polarity of the antenna. If you're communicating with other antennas that are pointed straight up, then you should have yours pointed straight up. If everyone's antenna is pointed straight up and yours is pointed horizontal, you're going to get a very weak reception from everybody. So you want to have your antenna polarized the same as everyone else, basically.
So I'd assume the standard is pointing straight up and down.
Seems to be.
All right, that's what mine's doing right now. I'll point it straight up.
Also, just while we're on the subject, 916 megahertz is a very interesting frequency because it turns out the wavelength is about 12 inches, 12-inch wavelength. So a quarter wavelength would be like 3 inches for a quarter wave vertical antenna, monopole. But that's one of them. There's another one. It's 5/8 of that. A 5/8 wave, 5/8 of 12 inches. I'm saying approximately. If you want to get exact, we can get exact down to fractions of an inch, but there's no sense. And the 5/8 wave antenna's longer, might be 5 or 6 inches, something like that. I don't remember exactly. And that works a little bit better. But I can't tell right now what's in that antenna that comes with it. It's either going to be a quarter wave monopole or a 5/8 monopole. And simple as that. Go ahead.
So I'm just looking at the one David sent, and at first I was like, oh, it's 4G, it's not going to work. But so what megahertz are the Helium?
916. 916
okay.
Megahertz.
So
and a lot.
So it looks like it would work in the range of this one, right?
Yeah, I like that frequency range that is highlighted there, 698 to 960. A lot of times they'll add another number and they'll say like optimize for 915 or 916. The center of that band might fall at 915. That would work.
Okay, so yeah, so I was incorrect in my first glance, and this antenna may in fact improve reception.
Well, I'm looking at that cable, and that's a long cable. And let me just say one more thing: not just any length cable. The requirement for that cable is there's a number of requirements, but the most important requirement is that it be in a multiple of half waves. So it would have to be a perfect multiple, let's say, of 6 inches. And if it wasn't a perfect multiple of 6 inches, there's going to be a lot more loss on the cable. The standing waves are going to increase. And what a standing wave is, when the transmitter transmits, you want all the energy to go out the antenna. But if there's a standing wave, some of the energy bounces back. So you got energy going out and energy coming in, and the energy coming in cancels out the energy going out. So you wind up with a weaker signal going out. And if it's really bad, it could actually wreck the transmitter. So you want that, the length of that cable is important. It needs to be a multiple of half waves if you want it to be perfect. And there's a device. We have a device that we can put on that cable and tell you exactly what its length is. And by the way, there's a difference between the physical length and the electrical length. And each cable has what's called a velocity factor. And this is what it means, is normally the radio signal travels at the speed of light, but some cables, it can't go that fast. It only can go 0.95%. 0.95 of the speed of light, and that affects the length. And so when you're calculating the length, you got to compensate by that factor. And but we have a device you can put on the end of the cable, and we can tell you everything about that cable and everything about that antenna and tell you if it's perfect or not. And we talk more about that some other time. It would be an antenna analyzer, and it can analyze cables, it can analyze the antenna, and it can analyze the system of cable and antenna.
Rich, does that have to be attached to the transmitter receiver, or can do that with the cable and the antenna separately?
Well, that's an excellent question, because that's how it's done. You can hook the device right up to the antenna with no cable, and then just see how the antenna is doing, and get a lot of information from the antenna in that regard. And then you can hook it up just to the cable and check the cable and see how it's doing. And then you can put them both together and check them both out together and see how they're doing. And there's not enough time to explain what the differences are and how you would do that. But actually, one of the things you can do is you can calibrate the unit so the even though you're running through the cable, it sees the antenna only. If there's any anomalies on the cable, it'll tell you exactly how many inches up the cable the anomaly is. So anyway, there's a lot to it. And
but this sort of testing and analysis, the Helium hotspot isn't even in the picture. It's just the cable and the antenna.
Yeah. The pots. When you do this stuff, the hotspot has to be turned off, and the antenna cannot be near any other antennas that are radiating signals.
Okay. So if I buy an antenna and a cable, I could bring it down to MakeHaven, and you've got a toy that could do these sort of measurements.
Yeah. Or on the other hand, you can get one of those toys yourself. And
I could. What do they go for?
The one about $750.
Yeah, I don't think I do that. Especially if MakeHaven has one.
That's a discount. Normally they're like $1,000.
Yeah, I don't know that we have one actually, but
no, you don't have one at MakeHaven that I know of.
Yeah, I can look into it, but we'll have to.
If you're gonna look into it, this is what you want to look up. Look up Rig Expert 1000. 1000 being it'll work all the way up to 1,000 megahertz. Rig Expert 1000. That's the one you want. That's like top of the line stuff.
All right. I don't know if that's a significant sum, but I'll take a look.
Yeah.
Great. Are there any other insights? I think we're kind of coming. I figured an hour and a half is probably enough that we've covered a lot of ground. So I guess if you're holding back on a question or idea, it would be a time to jump in with it.
Yeah.
And as far as the length you're talking about, Rich, is there I guess we could come up with a table, or just like, I don't know if there's simple ways we can figure out whatever calculation it is, and then just tell people like buy this at this length, to simplify each person having to work out what it is.
Well, yeah, I suppose you could probably do that. You could probably make up a bunch of cables and offer them for sale.
And cut them ourselves.
Now, there's a guy on YouTube who by the way, those cables are really cool. There's a center conductor and it's Teflon all around the center conductor, and then it's like double shielded on top of that. It can handle a lot of power and take a lot of heat. That's why they're so skinny as compared to the LMR 600, which is 6/10 of an inch. And so you can learn to put the connectors on. There's a guy on YouTube that shows how to put those connectors on those cables. It's a piece of cake once you see how it's done. So you can make your own cables and do it at the right length.
Yeah. And getting a crimp for something like that, that would be an appropriate sort of MakeHaven.
I don't even think there is a crimp. There's no crimp. It's self solder.
Oh, really? Okay. Cool.
Okay.
So yeah, any other thoughts or ideas? John, did we forget to cover anything that?
No. I just took a look at the exchanges. I've got 3 of them here up. One of them shows Helium at $1.80, one at $1.90, and one at about $2. So up a bit.
Yeah, you want to share your screen with the exchange just so people see that? We haven't really talked about that.
Was that a stock price? Is it on the stock market?
Well, it's what
No,
people
it's
buy
on
it for in the
crypto exchange.
Crypto exchange. It's like a stock market.
Yeah, so you can see it was down around 30 to 50 cents when they went live with the data transfer. You know, the charging for data transfer, which has only been which it was only implemented about 2 weeks ago. It really shot up. It's kind of leveled out. And here's the current value at just went up, $1.9101. And this is an exchange called who.com. This is one called Biloxi. Here, Helium is at $1.9866. And this one is one somebody on the call turned me on to, Hotbit. And there it's at $1.79, about $1.79.
Yeah, and to kind of be clear for folks that haven't used cryptocurrency before, there are these different exchanges, and you would essentially, you'd have to look at how trusted that exchange was, and you could go onto that marketplace and exchange typically dollars. Sometimes they might have you change to Bitcoin first. But you would exchange between either cryptocurrencies or to dollars, and then you transfer those dollars to a bank account. The reason you want to check to make sure they're reputable and good is with cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, you hear these stories of once you've given away, once you've transferred it, there's no central authority that manages it. It's handled by cryptography. So when you lose the keys or you lose the you give them to someone else, you've lost the asset, and it's not recoverable because it's locked in that cryptocurrency thing that protects the whole system. So I think somebody mentioned that Coinbase was thinking. So Coinbase is kind of the gold standard. It's the popular, more accessible. People agree that it's pretty stable exchange, and there's always talk about what they'll carry because it sort of anoints that cryptocurrency with a little bit more legitimacy. And the talk is about whether Coinbase will carry Helium, which they may well carry. And then that makes it easier for a larger market to access it rather than these sort of, I guess, more fringe. I don't know how fringe these are, but less commonly known and used exchanges. Does that help clarify for folks? John, do you want to add anything I missed?
Yeah, I'm a novice at this. I do know that on the Helium boards, they say that the exchanges that I showed and that I've linked to here are a little dodgy. you know, and you wouldn't want to be trading your life savings on it. You know, I think you are basically trading with individuals, and you have no idea if they're going to hold up their end. But I don't know if somebody who's more knowledgeable about crypto can speak to that better than I can.
Yeah, I think the exchange normally acts as a broker, but there might be, you know, a broker that makes sure the exchange happens. But yeah, I'm not clear enough on the specifics.
Yeah.
The one thing I know, the past, when I filed my taxes this past year, there's now a block you have to check saying whether you own cryptocurrency, and then you have to report any sales of it. So that is something now, once you own a hotspot, you will have to check on your taxes.
Yeah. And I think, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, is that any sale of cryptocurrency is treated like the sale of a stock? So it's a capital gain or loss?
Yes, it's either short-term or long-term capital gains. But yeah, even, I mean, as soon as you spend it, it's taxable.
Yeah.
And any use of it is taxed.
And there's a space on the new filing form for that information. It wasn't there last year. It is there now.
Yeah, if you have a
just came
hotspot,
out
you
today.
have to check it.
I just saw it in the news today. I saw the form and what they ask about the cryptocurrencies. I don't understand damn thing about those cryptocurrencies at all.
Yeah, it's a pain. The one thing you want to do is make sure you only really use one exchange, because this past year I've used Coinbase and Coinbase Pro, which are two different exchanges, and I had to buy the most expensive TurboTax to actually do my taxes this past year. But yeah, that is something you have to look at. It is reportable, and as soon as you spend it or in any way, shape, or form make it into cash, you have to report it as income.
But a lot of folks probably just leave it as speculation. Yeah.
That's the best thing. I mean, the only thing you have to do is, if you don't do anything with it, is just check the box saying you have it. That's all. As long as you don't sell it or trade.
I don't know if you can hear me. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was having some issues, and that's why I jumped out and jumped back in. Yeah, but I was looking at the available markets, and I think Binance so far is the most reputable. They have a major exchange, but then I think because of regulatory reasons, they couldn't operate in the U.S., and so they have to create a U.S. version of it. So that's Binance.us. Still, I'll trade with caution with cryptocurrencies. There's still, you know, a lot of questions around it. But you just do your research, and I think you should be fine. I had a quick question about the supply. I know the total supply is around a bit over 36 million right now. Do we have an idea for the circulating supply? How many HNTs have in mind so far?
I don't. Let me trying to think where I might get that.
So I'm looking at Coinbase, and normally, you know, they would have it, but I was just curious if we had it somewhere else.
I think the app actually has it, because when you click on
see, circulating
network,
supply,
it says circulating supply, and then it has the number of blocks. So
yeah, there it is.
Circulating supply is 47 million.
47 million?
Yeah.
Yes, 47 million.
I'm seeing on CoinMarketCap that the total supply is 36 million. Unless that data
that was probably at that time. I think as more and more of it's mined, I think it all depends, again, whether it's being burned as it's being used. And as long as it's being burned at a greater rate than it's actually being mined, it's going to be, you know, negative inflation. If it's not being used, it's inflationary, and it's going to become less and less. But as long as it's being used and burned, it's you know, theoretically has a limit or negative inflation.
So it isn't one of those tokens that has a max supply, like a max.
No, I believe it's infinite. It's as long as you want to keep on burning it. So that's the key, is you want to keep on using it and burning the HNT, and then you're going to increase the price. That's why if we use more systems out there, devices that are actually using it, we can kind of try to burn up the supply.
Yeah, which means that people want to buy it back from us.
Yeah.
Whatever we've been holding. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
because it kind of defeats the purpose of all we're doing is getting more hotspots and making just more of it without it being used. Then it's just like the regular paper money, infinite.
So were there any other questions? I think we might, I might call an end to the formal part, stop the recording, and, people, of course, are welcome to chat afterwards as long as they like, but folks can go without fear of missing anything major. So last call. All right. Well, I want to thank John for all the work he's done and being the first one to present, without a script or anything. And thanks to everyone who jumped in and has shared what you've learned. And it's a very interesting time with all this technology being, cryptocurrency is meeting these other technologies, and they may well be have interesting effects we can't predict, and fun to be on the ground floor. So thanks everyone for coming, and feel free to stay in chat, but we're ending the formal part.